For almost 100 years, the word Boeing meant one thing. It meant the plane would not fall out of the sky. Boeing built the bombers that won a world war. It built the jet that shrank the planet. It helped put men on the road to the moon. It was a company run by engineers, people who believed that if you got the math right, everyone came home. And then, in the space of 5 months, 2 of its newest planes dropped out of the air and killed 346 people. It wasn't bad luck. It wasn't a freak storm. It was a decision, made in a boardroom, years before either plane ever took off. This is the story of how the greatest engineering company on Earth forgot the one thing it was built to do. For most of the 20th century, Boeing had a simple rule. Engineers were in charge. The people who designed the wings ran the company. Safety wasn't a department, it was the culture. If a Boeing engineer said a plane wasn't ready, it didn't fly. Not for a deadline, not for a customer, not for the stock price. That was the company that built the 747, the jumbo jet that put the world on a plane. And then, in 1997, Boeing made the deal that would quietly kill that culture. It bought its dying rival, McDonnell Douglas, for $16 billion. On paper, Boeing won. In reality, McDonnell Douglas's executives took over the building. People inside said it best. McDonnell Douglas bought Boeing with Boeing's own money. These were finance men, not plane men. They didn't fall in love with airplanes. They fell in love with the share price. Soon, the headquarters moved 1,000 miles away from the factory floor, so the executives wouldn't have to look at the engineers every day. This was no longer a company that happened to make money. It was a company that made money and happened to build planes. Between 2013 and 2019, Boeing spent $43 billion buying back its own stock, more than the company earned in that entire time. In one single year, 66% of Boeing's spending went to shareholders and buybacks. Just 9% went into new equipment to actually build planes. A brand new, safer aircraft would have cost around $7 billion. That was roughly what Boeing was handing to Wall Street every single year. They had the money to build the future. They chose to buy their own shares instead. By 2011, Boeing had a problem. Airbus had a new fuel-sipping jet, and airlines were lining up to buy it. Boeing needed an answer fast, and it did not want to spend billions on a new design. So it did something cheaper. It took the 737, a plane first built in the 1960s, and bolted enormous modern engines onto it. But the engines were too big. They changed the way the plane flew, pushing its nose up toward a stall. Instead of fixing the airframe, Boeing hid the problem in software. They called it MCAS, a program that could shove the plane's nose back down automatically. It relied on a single sensor, one point of failure on a passenger jet. And to keep airlines from paying for expensive new pilot training, Boeing barely told anyone it existed. It was mentioned once in the manuals, and then that mention was deleted. Pilots were flying a plane that could fight them for control, and they didn't even know the system was there. On October 29, 2018, Lion Air Flight 610 took off from Jakarta. One sensor failed. MCAS believed the plane was climbing too steeply, and it pushed the nose down. The pilots pulled up. It pushed down again, and again, more than 20 times. They were fighting a machine for control of their own airplane, and they didn't know why. The plane hit the Java Sea. 189 people were gone. Boeing's response was to point at the pilots. Then, on March 10, 2019, Ethiopian Airlines Flight 302, the same model, the same system, nosed into the ground 6 minutes after takeoff. 157 more people, 346 in total. This time, the world didn't wait. Every 737 MAX on Earth was grounded for nearly 20 months. And then came the documents. Internal Boeing messages showed employees knew. One wrote that the plane was designed by clowns, who are in turn supervised by monkeys. Another wrote, "I would put a family member on a MAX simulator-trained aircraft. I still haven't." In 2021, Boeing paid $2.5 billion to settle the case. Not a single executive went to prison. And the culture that caused it? It never left. In January 2024, a door plug blew off a brand new MAX in midair over Portland. Investigators found the bolts holding it in place had simply been left out at the factory. By chance, no one died. Boeing agreed to plead guilty to fraud. And then, in 2025, the government let it walk away without a conviction at all, for just over $1 billion. No felony record, no executive behind bars. One lawyer for the families called it what it was: the deadliest corporate crime in American history. Today, Boeing still builds a third of the world's airliners. The name still sits on the side of planes you'll fly on this year. But the lesson underneath this story isn't really about one company or one plane. It's about what happens when the people counting the money take over from the people building the machine. 346 families already know the price of that trade. The only question left is whether anyone else will remember it before the next deadline beats the next warning.